Thanks, Jody. My name's Dave Miller. I am the unpleasant blind guy. And I told you guys I wasn't going away, and I'm not. This time, I'm going to do a regular unpleasant blind guy show. And I am privileged to be interviewed by Kaiser Schuff of Kaiser's Castle. You can find his stuff on YouTube. He does a live feed. And everyone, please check that out. Check out his previous ones, too. This will be my third time being interviewed by Kaiser. And I'm going to have this show on this week and as many weeks as possible so that we can have the whole thing. So let's get right into it. Kaiser, thank you very much for having me on, friend.
No problem, Dave. It's always a pleasure talking with you. I've listened to a lot of your shows. You've got a very good depth of perception on some things, and so I'll throw flowers at your channel too, the Unpleasant
Oh,
Blind Guy. And Dave is anything but unpleasant. He just he's a good guy, and I love doing shows with him. So, with that being said, what was the first topic you wanted to jump on feet first today, brother?
well, I have to say, man, we are in serious trouble as a country. I just heard a survey, and I have to say it disturbs me. The survey involved Halloween candy, and Reese's, of course, was number one. Uh, but the thing that really disturbed me was that number six, uh, candy corn was paralleled in the same place with Hershey bars. Okay, candy corn isn't candy. Candy corn is a lie from the pit of hell. And I have to say, Kaiser, if we in this country equate candy corn with Hershey bars, we are in serious, serious trouble. And our greatest minds have to work on resolving these issues.
Oh, I would agree with that. The amount of nonsense we get wrapped around the axle over in America, it proves that the first world we have to invent problems. You know what I'm saying, brother?
Absolutely. That's just a little bit of fun, though.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
because if we don't, if we don't have fun, if we don't stop to talk about the ridiculous and have a little bit of fun, then that literally our heads are going to explode. Your audience may not know. I take 3 vacations a year, and when I do that, um, I shut the internet off. As the only time I'm on there is to look to see if I've ordered something and if it's come in the mail. I don't even bother with social media or anything like that because otherwise I would just go insane. It really does recharge me, and I highly recommend disconnecting from the net once in a while. But let people know before you do, because the first time I did that, there were people about ready to call Burlington PD and have them come do a welfare check because I just dropped out the first time.
Oh yeah. It's always refreshing to get away from the internet. I there's so much drama on it, so it's pointless. But yeah, I get away from it probably once a year and just regroup and recalculate. And I get away from it as often as I can, but I still maintain a presence, for family and friends on certain sites. But that's about it. I mean, on that, I stay away from all the other garbage, of course. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, um, where to start though? I mean, we have we have so many issues. I know
Yep.
you listened to our English Defense League radio show that we did for Thursday the 10th of this month. And we covered a few issues. We covered the impeachment madness, and of course, we covered Syria, and we talked a little bit about the NBA and China. And we did a little bit of each of those.
Yep.
So there's just a whole lot to unpack right now.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of misidentification on who the real threats are. And China is the number one threat.
Oh, they're a big
And
one. Yeah.
oh yeah, they're the number one because they've been planning for the Chinese sun to rise now. This is their time. They've been building their navy. They're flexing their force already in Hong Kong, which is what started the whole debate within the NBA. I saw on the trades, I can't remember which program it was on, where a couple guys got Free Hong Kong, and they were wearing Free Hong Kong T-shirts,
Mm-hmm.
and some basketball place and security comes over and says, "Hey, you can't fly that banner. It's our no signs thing." But they didn't expel them. They didn't tell them to take off their T-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
I heard somebody say that could be litigation on them, but they didn't get kicked out. They weren't told to change their shirts. So I think that'd be gamey because they do have a no sign shirt. But I'm sure if it was a defense sign, those little things that they hold up at
Oh, sure. Yeah.
sports ball, they wouldn't have
Sure.
taken that. So, it's 10 one half dozen the other. Sports never really entertains me until it's college football season, and that's when I get
Oh,
into
there you
the
go.
swing. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I'm into college football myself. I cannot watch the NFL, and with the kneeling and with the league just pandering to all that stuff, I just can't watch them anymore. But I will give you a story. This happened less than a week ago in Philadelphia, of all places. And I am going to expand a bit on this with audio on EDL radio on Sunday. Okay, this was at a Philadelphia 76ers game. Okay, so think about the symbolism involved right there. Philadelphia is the city where the Declaration of Independence was written. It's the city where the first Congress met.
The
Okay,
city of brotherly love.
well that too.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is the city where the birth of freedom of the United States of America happened, and at a 76ers game, they were hosting a Chinese team. An exhibition game, I'm guessing, and
Right.
there were some people that went there, wearing well, carrying free Hong Kong signs, and they got near the Chinese bench and they were carrying free Hong Kong signs. Security made them give up their free Hong Kong signs, and when one of them began to chant free Hong Kong, they were thrown out. And this to me, I don't have the kind of white hot anger that I did when I first heard about this,
Right.
just because of the symbolism. Now I've cooled down just a bit. But really, if you think about the symbolism of this, that in that city where the birth of freedom of the United States of America occurred, um, this kind of thing happened to defend representatives of a country. And really, all this guy was doing was just chanting "Free Hong Kong." He was defending freedom, their freedom movement over there in Hong Kong.
Right.
Okay, when you think of that, and you think about China, which has, as you heard me say on EDL radio, concentration camps, uh, you know, um, organ harvesting. They have a horrible human rights record. It just boggles the mind, and honestly, it makes me not want to not to watch an NBA game again. And I know most people don't care about that, but just people who really are in tune with the history uh, of this country and with what that history represents,
Right.
the
Well,
best the best of humanity. It's maddening. Go ahead, please.
oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to bring up the Liberty Bells there. Our
Yeah.
first coin that was minted by it was Franklin. It had an Indian head on the front, and
Hmm.
you know what the words were over top of it? It wasn't "In God We Trust." It said "Mind your business," and that's something that nobody does anymore. They want to mind your business, not their business. They don't want to mind my. I should be minding my business, not all into
Hmm.
your business.
Hmm.
And it amazes me that uh, America has fallen, and these people that social signal and that want to act this that way and that way and think this and that. It all always makes me laugh because they never
Hmm.
act on fact, they never put context in, and this is just a way that this fast fashion, this Depeche Mode of uh, YouTube and whatever works. The news cycle even.
Hmm.
And they create drama for drama's sake to get headlines to try to drum up, likes and links to their
Hmm.
channels.
Hmm.
And, it's unnecessary. Uh, Gone are the days of a good debate. I mean, some of the best debates I've seen was back in the 80s, where, I
Hmm.
remember one time, chairs would fly at some of them, just spirited debate, but it'd be done and over with. And I don't know, just thoughts on that, because there's a coarsening of conversation that's happening,
Oh yeah.
and a fascistic control over it throughout academia, the media, and
Oh,
and
they're horrible. Yeah.
and Hollywood's a part of the media. And look at the outrage over the Joker movie, a made-up beginning movie for Batman's nemesis. You
Right.
know, it's just insanity.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't even seen that thing, and I don't intend to. This kind of self-flagellation here, by the way, Kaiser, that sometimes conservatives get into. Um, the movie was obviously put out by a lefty, okay, and the guy said, "Well, you can't
Oh
do
yeah,
comedy anymore because of political correctness." Okay, he was right about that, but the movie has a lefty message, okay, and then what happens? You have Glenn Beck come on his show and say, "Well, I saw that movie and it was the greatest movie ever made. You got to go see it." No, you don't. This is the thing. If you have somebody that you oppose, don't give them oxygen. Okay, don't look at
exactly.
CNN. Don't
Yeah.
look at MSNBC. Ignore them. Okay, and that's not to say that you can't have a polite disagreement with someone and debate with someone that you know. Okay, but if all they're going to do is stand there with a bullhorn and scream in your face, then it's useless. Don't waste your time. That's what I say, and don't give them any oxygen.
Oh, I agree. I agree with
Yeah,
you wholeheartedly, brother, on that. Uh, anyway, so to get off on that tangent, I don't. Oh, we got there because of the Chinese thing,
right.
and the city of brotherly love, and how
Hmm.
it is a damn shame that the city that birthed the Constitution of the United States
Yeah,
is the city that is uh, by vent of private corporations, and that's a whole nother issue people will argue about, and it's retarded. But the if you're an American company, you should have American values. But with this
exactly.
globalist community, uh, they just say, "Oh, it's a globalist core set of values." Well, globalism is communism, just rebranded and renamed.
It
Period.
is. It is. And you have and now there's an interesting way of looking at it, Kaiser. You kind of nailed it there because what you have with globalism is the same thing you have with communism. A very few people at the top, very rich, very privileged, law can't touch them, and everybody else is a serf. And that's exactly what you have in every communist country you ever visited. In fact, I hope you'll confirm this. That's also what you have in every Middle Eastern, traditional Middle Eastern country that there is. Am I right?
Oh yeah, for the most part. I mean, people forget that in Syria and even northern Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
they talk about the Kurds. Well, there's many different ideologies within the Kurds. You
Right.
actually have a communist ideology. I think it's the YTT or YKT or something like that. YKK. I think that's what it is. YKK. And anyways, that branch is strictly communist.
Mm-hmm.
And a matter of fact, they've trained Antifa over there. A lot of people do not understand that some of the red light guys
Uh-huh.
that are over there directing Antifa got their training from there.
Well,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, no. I was just going to agree with you and say now I did acknowledge that on EDL radio when I gave my opinion about Syria. Not all Kurds are the same, just
right,
like not all Mohammedans are the same.
right,
Um, and we shouldn't be defending some of them.
right.
Certainly, if if the ones that Turkey evidently has a problem with are was like totalitarian, communist, authoritarian dirtbags. Okay, well then yeah, I honestly don't have a problem with anything happening to them. It's just the collateral damage alongside them that Turkey would do that concerns me deeply. Giving Turkey any advantage anywhere uh, was a big concern of mine.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, man.
it's very problematic because with the collateral damage. But
Hmm.
what you're looking at is nothing more than Turkey's doing what Turkey's done before. That's why that one show's called The Young Turks, the Armenian genocide.
Hmm.
And Turkey will do it again under this idiot that they have
Oh
over there
yeah.
now. Remember, people forget Obama said publicly on a mic that he knew was hot. He said, "I talked to Erdogan often and many
Hmm.
because he is my number one advisor on Middle East problems." Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's enough to curdle your blood, especially if you know anything. That Erdogan, it's the same. I call him Erdogan, but it's really the same guy. Everybody knows who we're talking about. This is the guy that said of Islam, um, you know, um, our mosques are our barracks, the domes are our shields, or excuse me, the domes are our helmets, and the minarets are our spears. Uh, he's talking about a caliphate, and he's moving to make one happen. If people are concerned about ISIS
Yep.
trying to make a caliphate happen, there are caliphates and there are caliphates. There's always somebody that wants to be at the top, and Erdogan wants to be at the top of a caliphate. He wants that, and he's making that happen. He's been interfering in Europe,
Yep.
insinuating his people in Europe. Um, as we said to reference a conversation we had before the show, Israel and Saudi and other places, they're not the only ones that have people on every continent. Turkey definitely has. And Erdogan has been using his position in NATO to
Yep.
prepare for his own run for a caliphate. That's something else that's concerning, especially given the close proximity of northern Syria to Israel.
Oh, well, here's the major thing people always forget. Up till World War I, there was a caliphate, and it was headed by the Turks.
Yes, it was.
And all of a sudden, after World War I, the caliphate dissolved, and then you had Ataturk come in, make his reforms. And I remember going over to Turkey back in the day, and even up till 2009, I think was the last time I bounced through Turkey.
Hmm.
You would see pictures of Ataturk there. Well, no, that wasn't the last time, but the last time I saw Ataturk's picture. The last time I went through there, I think it was 2012, 2013. Yeah, that was the last time I went through Turkey. And guess what? Some of the same haunts that I went to in um, why am I mind dumping the name of the town now? It's the airport's right there. Damn it. It's
You're not
their
talking about
capital city. No, it's their
yeah,
capital city.
Ankara.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's it, but it might be. Let me look at my passport. But
It's not
anyways,
Ankara.
it
Okay,
matters not. Give me 1 second. But
all right.
getting back to what I was saying, it was Istanbul. I just
Oh,
looked at my
wait a
passport.
minute. Okay, now hang on a second, bro.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, Kaiser. Now, I always thought that they changed the name of the city from Istanbul to Ankara some years ago. I knew that it was the old name after Constantinople, of
Right,
course.
right, right,
Just like the We Are Giants thing
right.
song. But I thought they changed that name to Ankara some years
Nope.
ago. Did they not do that?
On the stamp in that I got from the last visit, it still says Istanbul.
Wow.
Yep. So, anywho, getting back to that,
Mhm.
um, he had designs, and I believe that he had a person on the inside in the U.S., a president that was all for the reestablishment of the caliphate. And if people disbelieve that, they have to remember that ISIS was USIS. It was funded by the damn CIA. And that's a fact. We have a good Air Force. I was talking about this last night on BZ show.
Hmm.
And they may burn some equipment into the ground, miss by a little bit if they're dropping you supplies. But when they were missing by grid squares and dropping arms and ammunition directly into ISIS's areas, and I think it happened 9 times that was documented by the media, and that's
Hmm.
only what was documented by the media, then we have a problem there, right? That means that was probably a purposeful drop, in
Hmm.
my opinion.
Yeah,
And
sounds like it.
I'm the foremost expert on only one thing, my own opinion, my friend. But
Me sounds a
anyways,
lot like me. Yeah.
yeah, but some of the same haunts I went to in Istanbul the last time, walking down Taksim, Street and all that stuff. Everybody walks down Taksim streets whenever you go down to Istanbul at night. There's like 2 million people that will walk down that street every night. And some of the same haunts I go back to all the time because they're nice places. I know that, they're not scammy. And some of those places have replaced Ataturk's picture with Erdogan's picture. Think about it.
That, yeah, that's frightening. That
Yeah.
actually is, given the history. That really is frightening because, well, we know what happened with the attempted coup, which I really wish had succeeded. I think there's an element in Turkey that really would like to keep that closer relationship with the West, but Erdogan has got his sights set on caliphate, and I think he's moving towards that. Uh, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but yeah.
Well, I do agree, but everybody forgets the three M's. There's three legs of the stool for a coup. Okay, and without any of those three legs, you will fail. Money,
Hmm.
military, and the media. If
Hmm.
any of those are not secured at the right time and the right place for it, you will have exactly what happened to Turkey. He got to the media, he was able to say he was still alive, and consolidated power.
Hmm.
They had the money
Yeah,
from Chulaban or whatever his name was, and they
right.
had the military on their side. But once he got to the media and the masses who are asses woke up and said, "No, he's alive. We're gonna," well, guess what? Coup just fell.
Yeah, I know, and it was a damn shame. I was watching it, going, okay, that's just terrible. I'm really sad to hear that. But to get to the Syria thing now, I've heard a lot of opinion from a lot of people I respect, you included, on this. And one of the first things that I hear that I absolutely agree with is that it really is time that our young men and now young women stop dying in these, endless BS wars. Okay, that as I said on EDL radio, wind up lasting for a generation. Okay, uh, and I absolutely agree with that. I had two cousins in Vietnam. One came back okay, and the other one was given a medical discharge because he caught malaria. And guess what? He's
Right.
still dealing with today. Okay,
Malaria. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so, I know what some of this is like, at least from one perspective, far less than you, but at least from some perspective, I know what this is like. And I was listening to Glenn Beck today, and he was saying, well, he and his, and I think it's like, Stuber Gear, his one of his cohort sidekicks. And they were saying, "Oh well, this stuff going on in Syria, it's absolutely Obama's policy, not Trump's policy." Now, I disagree with that. I think that the mess in the Middle East, not just northern Syria, goes back to Truman. Okay, and I think you understand this where I'm going with this, but your audience doesn't. So I want to flesh this out a bit. We haven't made proper war. This country has not for almost 75 years. Once World War II was completed, we decided, along with lefties and possibly globalists too, Kaiser, that we weren't going to make uh, real war anymore. That we weren't going to make the kind of war that won World War II. We weren't going to say, all right, we're going to go in to where these bad actors are, and we're going to wipe out completely their capability to make war. No, now we're going to make surgical war. We're going to make politically correct war. We're going to make sure that that we don't wind up bombing out an entire village because there's a terror cell there. Because that would cause too much collateral damage, and we want to be liked in the world. We want to be loved in the world. We don't want to be seen as a bully. Blah blah blah. And what did you get from that? You got you got Korea, where we fought them to a standstill and then went home. You got Vietnam, where we fought them to more or less a standstill, and then we went home. And you got all of this mess in the Middle East, where if a soldier uh, kills an enemy in a way that is politically incorrect, he goes up on charges. That's the situation you have now. Now, I heard you taking an intake of breath, and please jump in here because I do have more to say on this.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say that's the ROEs, and you can look to where it started. In all honesty, you got Brzezinski's writings. Also on the right side, why am I mind dumping that dude's name? But he was Carter's foreign advisor. That's Mika's daddy, by the way. The other
The
guy
big Nev.
is a big,
The,
yeah, Z Big, yeah.
mm,
And so this stuff is incestuous this way. But then you had the Atlantic Council, all these little think tanks come up, and it's on the neocon and the neo-progressive side. And
mm-hmm,
they look at it as, and look, I'm as guilty as the next man. Being a contractor, war is my profession. Okay,
right.
this is just that's a natural fact. Do I like it? No, I have the most disdain for it. But I do feel that the ROEs that they've put the soldiers under are pointless. They're useless. I went from seeing, let me see, in '05, we didn't have any cameras in vehicles and stuff unless you put one in,
Right.
to cover your butt.
Sure.
Now they're in even the MRAPs, the military drives, and the what the hell were they called? It's an infantry vehicle they use also over there. It's a
The Bradley?
no, they use it's a wheeled vehicle. It's Striker,
Okay.
and at every gun also they have cameras. So if you do a shoot, they download that camera, and then that gets put in through what we had at Combat Outpost Talicon. This is the last time when I saw it majorly like this, on a combat outpost that was busy, so I know how the process works. Or any
Mm-hmm,
cameras on the base, they have different cameras, or the Pegasus itself. A Pegasus is a balloon with a camera under it.
mm-hmm.
They will take and upload that to go to the Pentagon for that shooting to be rendered good or bad. So you have, it's no different than being a police officer in the
Yeah.
U.S. You've
Mm-hmm.
got others deciding whether your shoot was good or bad. And so if we're going to fight a war like that with our hands tied to our balls, Mike, look, it's a known fact. The GRU and the former KGB, which is now the FSB, but this is actually the SVT, their foreign service. That's who does the contracting in the Rodina in Russia. The only thing changed was initials. And in 2005, when they used to fly into Camp Delta in Al-Qut, and they would fly in the big, oh shit, uh, these big cargo planes. They'd fly them in. It would come to me. They're the biggest cargo planes on the planet. They'd fly them into that air base. Uh, the contractors coming out of there were all KGB, quote unquote GRUSVT, and that's who they were. They're strapped with all the latest in fashion of uh, Russian equipment, and they were guarding that bird, and they were also guarding some of the equipment that they were delivering to different. Because remember, that was a George Bush used to call it the coalition of the willing. Well, a friend of mine, Robbie Young Pelton, came up with the phrase, and we all laughed about it, but it's actually a true phrase. He's an author and whatnot, but uh, he called it the coalition of the billing. You know, the nations that were there all got paid by the good old USA. And that's what it's really all about, is that almighty petrodollar.
Well, that's part of it. Yeah. The and that was really what has kind of driven me, really since Vietnam, that we don't know how to make serious war anymore, or we don't bother to make serious war anymore. And as you say, there is money behind it. Um, as far as just going through these perpetual wars, but in doing that we weaken our military's morale, and we weaken our military at the same time with political correctness. There are two sets
Yep.
of physical requirements now. When a candidate goes to join the military, there's one for men and there's one for women. Now, um, I'm not going to say that women don't belong in the military, but I will say this. Okay, I am the unpleasant blind guy. Nobody wants me driving. Nobody wants me flying a commercial airliner or an airliner of any other kind, or driving a city bus. Now, there's a good reason for that, because I can't see to do it. Okay, not legally, anyhow. And we
Right.
need to, in my opinion, this is one of the places where we need to change. All right. In my opinion, we need to have one set of physical standards for the military that is tough, that is hard to meet. And if a woman happens to meet it, that's fine. But what I would like to see is for our enemies to soil their pants if they even think that American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines are going to come into their area and do their business, because uh, that uh, will generate respect. The other thing I want to see that I think is vital and will help resolve some of these issues, like the one we're in right now with Syria. It's symbolic, but I think it's important. We need to drop the name of the Department of Defense. We need to get rid of that and go back to the War Department. And we need to concentrate our military forces on training for and prosecuting war. No more of this politically correct garbage. No more of this worrying about whether someone is gay or a transgender or any of that other nonsense. This The military is not a damned Fortune 500 company, and it should never be approached that way. But that's the way we approach it now. We've been doing that for 25 years or more. It's ridiculous.
Well, I will say this on females in the military first. When I've been in, I joined in the 80s, mid 80s. There was always female MPs, and that was a good thing because they could take care and uh, keep you from getting some woman saying you were filling them up. They could search the woman, and they could also deal with the kids. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So there is a place for females, and I'll give you a real world example in Iraq. This is 05, '06 when it was live and on fire. The military didn't have enough females that were trained to actually go out on like missions with other units, and they invented what was called the lioness. Okay, and what they did was they embedded these females in with infantry units, Marine infantry units. I know this for a fact. And what you had was they were dealing with the women and the children. Okay, that is a positive. Okay, but they did get extra training and whatnot before they went in. Lioness training and the lioness, I have nothing but respect for all of them because I've met a bunch of them. My point being is that I agree with you. If you're going to a combat environment and you're gonna have them angry bees. That's what I call bullets because that's what it sounds like. Tau snaps flying all around you. Um, you need to have people that actually mentally and physically can handle it. But the whole problem with the military, I agree with you, is the political correctness. But see, that started with the Frankfurt School. We can go line and verse to where all this causation happened. The Atlantic Council, all of these different quote unquote think tanks. And they're the ones that took us from the War Department to the Department of Defense because it's kinder and more gentler and it makes us sound more humane. And we have not prosecuted a war to win. You are exactly right in that. But I also think there's a stopgap in between. We were never smart enough to actually implement it correctly. I think in '05 and '06 it started to get '03, '04, '05, '06 it started to get fixed by using contractors instead of soldiers. Here's my thinking on this. Look, you can do the same stuff for a less cost. Yeah, you pay more on the front side, but you're not paying for the medical, you're not paying for the dental, you're not paying. There's a lot of things you don't pay for when you get a contractor. They just make more money. But those, we used to laugh and joke that we were our country's scapegoat because nobody, there's only one person, I mentioned this on BZ show. One person, I know the guy who actually kept track of contractor deaths. Okay? And he goes by the name of Farrell Jundy. You can find his page. That man does Legion work. We don't have a foreign legion, but we do have contractors. And deservedly, any U.S. soldier who fights under the flag for this nation and wears a uniform, it is a crisis to have one die because they are a representative of this nation. And honestly, a contractor's not. And if you want to wage effective war, we either need to get a quote unquote foreign legion or deal in the real with what contractors truly are. And they could have taken all the ODA guys out like they did and replaced them with contractors, and the outcome might be different because all the ODA guys that were there, like Anglico, which comes out of MARSOC now because they've put all like force reconnaissance, all of it is now in MARSOC. The aircraft traffic controllers that call in bombs from the air, Anglico calls in bombs from ships, missiles from ships. And, they could have replaced them with their same versions that they have out there in the civilian world as contractors. And the mission still would have held. But see, that's just something to where all these think tanks, they think to it to a certain degree, and then they don't follow it to the logical, what is the solution? What's that stopgap? And that is your country's plausible deniability.
Well, part of that, I think, maybe Kaiser is because a lot of the people in these think tanks never went to war. They never had to face an enemy with a weapon in their hand and deal with them. It's an interesting thought experiment to them, and that's part of the problem. This sort of thing does need to be kept in the hands of people who've actually had to do that sort of thing. One of the things that uh, Robert Heinlein, Robert A. Heinlein, was a freak as far as his personal life goes, but he had some very good opinions regarding contractors in support positions. He felt that that should happen in the military. There shouldn't be officers or other people in charge of support positions and things of that nature that don't have anything to do with shooting for a living. Okay, his view was that civilian contractors should be used for that stuff, and I think we could have saved billions over the years because he first advanced this idea in the book Starship Troopers in I think like the mid '50s. We
Yep.
could have saved billions at this point had we decided to do that and just concentrate on training our people to prosecute war. And I think the other thing, Kaiser, that would have kept us out of these generations long wars would have been to again to prosecute war in the way we used to. And yes, that would make a lot of collateral damage, but you would also have a world where we would be respected, where some of these bad actors would not even bother raising their heads. One of the things that Sun Tzu said that was brilliant was the best way to win a war is to make sure that your enemy never fires a shot. Um, you know, that's what comes of being respected. You won't may not be loved, but at least you're respected. In 1946, we the United States of America were absolutely respected around the world because people looked at Dresden. That's the example I brought up yesterday on EDL radio, and they said, "Holy crap! If we go up against the United States of America or its allies, they're going to do this to us." And then they're going to go home and eat beefsteaks. Okay, and you're absolutely right when you talk about the culture of the war professional, almost the culture of the mercenary, if you want to put it that way. All right, but that is something that needs to be changed because if we don't change that culture, if we don't begin, in my opinion, if we don't begin to prosecute war the way it should be prosecuted, we're going to have situations like this in Syria. And in my opinion, pulling out of northern Syria, and I'm sure we disagree here, is a mistake. Not because of the Kurds that are up there, the communist Kurds. I don't give a rat's furry behind about them, but because of the Christians and because of the proximity to Israel. What worries me is that we've dug ourselves into this mile deep hole in the Middle East, and we may well have to redeploy and go back, if nothing else, to defend Israel or some of our other allies there, because we've handed that portion of that area over to Turkey. And as we said earlier, Turkey is the last is the last organization you want to trust with anything. And just to throw this in there, Turkey should have been kicked out of NATO years ago. Let's say that.
Yeah, the only reason they kept Turkey in all honesty, is because they have the largest land-based army in NATO. That's a fact. That's why they kept Turkey in, and they were right in very close proximity to Russia, so we could flank Russia. Geopolitically, you can go to any war college paper and find this written ad infinitum and ad in nauseum. Okay. Condoleezza Rice actually wrote the best white paper on it, and that was something that when I met her in '05 at the embassy in Baghdad.
You met her?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, you're a bastard. I'm completely jealous.
Oh,
You know,
she.
she was playing concert piano as a little girl while I was watching Batman. But go
Oh
ahead,
well,
please.
then that gets to the crux of it. My buddy Wilmots. I shouldn't use his last name. Anyways, I'm not going to use his last name. Anyway, so we're
Classical
sitting.
piano. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're sitting there, and if you've been to the embassy annex, uh, it's Saddam's old palace, and there's a room right off the main entrance area. There's a barber shop to the right. There's a room where they have like a dining facility, a DFAC, and then right there's a big open door, and that big open door had, if you've ever seen the picture of two horses rearing up to an Al Hussein missile, it's a fresco that's painted on the top of the dome in this room. If you've ever seen a picture of it, that's the room I'm talking about. And right next to the door where we're standing at the door frame was a big grand piano. And so she's shaking hands, talking to everybody, and we're at the very end of it, and there's nobody after us because everybody's crowded around this DFAC, and we're right at that corner. And her security team and her, go walking in, just for whatever reason they're going into that room or checking things out. I don't know the purpose, but this is a
Mm.
fact, a historical fact. All of a sudden, we start hearing this beautiful piano concerto happening, right? And
Oh,
me and my brother
damn.
break our damn necks to look, and it was her. And I'm probably maybe 4 feet away from that piano. And now everybody's behind us. And she played for like 10, 15 minutes, something like that, man. And it just took you, it was surreal. It took you out of the fact we were in a war zone and watching this. She's a fantastically lovely lady.
Mm-hmm.
Breaks my heart she never had kids, because somebody like that should always have kids. Most intellectual, intelligent person. Anyways, I don't want to get into all that crap, but
Uh,
my point being was you can find dissertations on why Turkey stayed in NATO ad
mhm.
infinitum, right? And yes, they should have been kicked out probably after uh, the last um, administration before Erdogan.
Right.
That's probably about the time they should have been zipped out. But here's the thing: they weren't, and they can still trigger NATO, and that's a problem.
Oh yeah.
And we were as we were talking, like you brought up earlier, um, there are Look, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, um, numerous other countries over there are equipped and provided support by us. Okay? And that's a fact. And Bush made the mistake. I watched it in real time when I left April Fool's Day from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1991 after the war was over. And we're sitting in there, and Bush had said we're going to back up uh, the Shia and back them up to the fullest. And he had the no-fly zone up in the Kurdish areas, and he dropped the no-fly zone down in Shia land. And it wasn't until 2005 in Al Qut, which is Shia land, where I went to a mass grave, my first mass grave, I should say, and just for documentary purposes, that what I had to do at that time. And I'm talking to my students going through becoming policemen, and everybody had lost many brothers and sisters to that time. They said they were winning on the ground until he took away that no fly. And that's when the helicopters came in. And once the helicopters came in, the slaughter commenced. And America did not give them any force multiplication. And so we repeated a war that should have stopped under Bush Sr., under Bush Jr. And I can disagree a little bit on Obama is the cause. Uh, there's no look. Trump kept his promise on getting our boys out of there. He kept a promise, and he was voted, in by a lot of people to do that. And I'm kind of with you on that too, but I don't give a hill of beans for any of them because I know we're in the end going to be back over there. But give us a generation or two to replenish good men and good women to serve this nation without having 22 a day happening, 22 suicides of good young men and women who served over there with the mental damage that comes from warfare. And that's really all I had to say on that, brother.
Well, and my God, man, as I said, I don't have words to say how much I respect the people. I mean, the fact, if I hadn't been the unpleasant blind guy, I would have tried to be a Marine. I'll tell you that right now. But God had different plans. But the thing is, I mean, I agree with you 100%. How we treat our people on the home front is, and when I say our people, I mean our military people on the home front, is a completely different thing, obviously. But I think from hearing what I said on EDL radio, and even from on this show, you see that I don't want these generations-long wars either, where our guys are just having to be constantly deployed and redeployed and redeployed. And that is where I think the mistakes have been made. We're in the cesspit, and we have to deal with being in the cesspit now. But there is a way forward. That is what I was trying to say. There is a way forward to stop doing that. And I think it's a way that we should adopt, because I don't want to see any more of these kids die in these crap hole places where they don't feel like they have any stake. At the same time, Kel Fritzy, who died a few months ago, once said, she's Canadian, by the way, for your audience. She was a Canadian podcaster and a great patriot. She once said, I think Canada is the best nation in the world, but I think the United States of America is the greatest nation in the world. Now, Kaiser, if you look back at history, you note that there have been great nations in the past that have steered the world. The Ottoman Empire being one of them. I wouldn't call them a great nation because the Ottoman Empire was Islamic, but you see what I mean in terms of power. These great nations did not hesitate to act And the thing about one great nation pulling out of an area and just saying, to hell with it. We're just gonna bugger off and leave. Is you leave a power vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Someone will step into that vacuum. They always do. They
and
historically
fill it.
always,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. They historically always have. The examples that I gave um, yesterday were when we decided to step back after Vietnam. And it was only a few years later, in 1975, that the Christians and the Mohammedans began serious fighting in Beirut. And we should have been warned anyway, because it was in 1972 when we were just arguing about pulling out of Vietnam, when the Israeli athletes were killed at the Munich Olympics. All right, but we chose to pull back and abdicate our greatness, and others came in to fill that vacuum. Mohammedans,
Yep.
Russia, to a lesser extent, China, and you also saw other terrorist groups. This was the era of the rise of the IRA, the Bader Meinhof gang, the Red Brigades, all of these people. The thing is, Kaiser,
Yep.
as much as I love our guys in uniform, and I try to do everything, whether I'm doing an Unpleasant Blind Guy show or whether I'm helping out Jeff Mitchell on EDL Radio, I always try and honor our military. Uh, we Someone has to be a great nation in this world, and whether other people like it or not, the United States of America is a nation of people who aspire to be free. And we can, if we have the will, change our politics, change our leaders, and things of that nature. And we can project the ideals of freedom and liberty overseas. Now, other cultures may not bite into that. Okay, but we can, at the very least, as a great nation, say no. If you mess with us, if you launch terrorist attacks into our country, if you mess with our allies, let's say Israel and the UK and others. All right, if you do that thing, we will destroy your capability to make war. No, we're not gonna stay in your country forever. Okay, but we will make sure that you are incapable of those bad acts again. That's what I go back to making real war. See, that's what I'm saying, Kaiser. We can be a great nation that is responsible and that does not leave these power vacuums that these bad actors can inhabit. But we have to tell the think tanks, no, go off and think about something else. And we have to be prepared to make real war so that we don't have our kids and now that I'm 60 years old, our grandkids out there being redeployed again and again and again and having themselves damaged when
And
they get back home.
and it helps destroy our families. And that's
Yes.
something nobody's talking about is the American families. These troops when they deploy,
Hmm.
and it's mission after mission, the divorce rate was off the chain. I've
Oh
been
yeah.
married I've been married 25 years, thank God.
Oh,
And
congratulations, man.
well, but I'm saying, yeah, I don't want to get into the whole rigmarole of silliness, but my point being is it affects the families. I agree with you on the power vacuum thing. Uh, the other thing I say is, besides Benjamin Franklin minting that coin that nobody pays attention to, they also didn't pay attention to the last words that he said after the Continental Congress. And the woman said, "What form of government did you give us there, Mr. Franklin?" And he
Mhm.
goes, "A republic, if you can keep it." Because republics usually have a shelf life of 200, 250 years.
Exactly.
And we're burning on that now. And they
We're on life
always
support.
and they always fall the same way. Every republic, the Grecian Republic, the Roman
Mhm.
Republic, all republics, the Weimar Republic, all of republics die one way, through the rot from inside, the degeneracy, the lack of common sense. People forget the first transgender surgery ever done? Do you know when that was done, Dave?
Go ahead, tell me.
During the Weimar Republic.
Yeah, I can believe that.
No, that's true.
No, no,
That's
you're absolutely right. I mean, look,
yeah.
I'm a student of ancient Rome, and the Roman Republic lasted actually longer than most of the rest. I mean, ours is on life support. Theirs lasted 400 years. But if you look at what happened at the end of it, that was when the Epicurean movement began. You began seeing, and look, I'm not bagging on the gays, okay? I do believe the word in the Bible that says a man shall not lay with a man, but I don't believe in going out and beating up homosexuals or, as the Mohammedans do, hanging them from cranes and stuff
Right,
like
right,
that. Okay, I don't
right.
believe in that crap.
None of us do.
Okay,
Right.
but you began seeing a rise in open homosexuality. You began seeing a rise in, well, they didn't have the technology to make transgenders, but you definitely began seeing a rise in drag queens and things like that. It got so bad in ancient Rome to the point where you get to the Principate of Caligula, and this guy was running around in dresses and
Yep.
stuff like that, and just a complete freak job.
Yep.
And he, of course, the Roman Republic was dead by that time, but he bankrupted Rome. It took oh my God, close to 100 years for them to regain their treasury, and by that time, the Principate of the Emperors was well in place, and that is, of course, totalitarianism.
Yep.
You're correct about republics. They don't last partly because, and it might have been Franklin that said this, and it might not. I'm willing to be corrected on this. Who said that republics have a tendency not to last because the people wind up voting themselves more and more largesse, more and more money.
Money from the treasury, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And it
Right.
was it was Franklin. I remember. Here's the thing. I do remember the Eastern. That's why the Eastern Orthodox Church is still so big.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with Catholicism and the Roman Church, which was also an Orthodox church at one time. A lot of people forget this.
Yeah.
Eastern Orthodoxy that lasted for another, I think it was 1100 to 1500 years in the
Oh
eastern
yeah.
parts of Kiev, of
Mm-hmm.
all that area over there. And that was all those churches were established by followers of Christ, the 12,
Mm-hmm. The,
disciples.
the apostles. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
So
was. Go
it,
ahead.
it just boggles the mind though that, you know, look at the Catholic Church, how degenerate it got even up into the Middle Ages. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the Dark Ages, and also Cordoba, Spain. That's the last mosque of the last invasion done by the Mohammedans
Yeah. Yeah.
that came into Europe, and that mosque was built to commemorate. This is how far we've gotten there. Now
Mm-hmm.
look, there's mosque everywhere. And what's the symbology of it? Hell, they wanted to build another mosque right down the road from where the World Trade Center was.
The Ground Zero Mosque. Yes, sir.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, not everything's symbology. Everything is done for a reason. There's nothing under the sun, and I've seen some of this stuff real time um, for reasons I had to do. But every every action that's created, you'll have an equal and opposite reaction, and
Mm-hmm.
usually they're both funded by the same groups. And what I mean by that, the same intelligence quote law enforcement groups. There's
Mm-hmm.
something called counterintelligence,
Right.
CIs, and so you have destabilization ops, which I kind of know a little something about, and restabilization ops. And there was a guy, Yuri Bezmenov, who summed it up best in a speech. He's using the Russian terminologies. But what state we're in right now is a state of normalization under the Russian terminologies. And normalization means you start correcting and controlling the language, you start correcting and controlling the people. And the people will self regulate because you can't use the unacceptable words. And, so these are just facts, but, who cares about facts nowadays, right? They don't suit somebody's political agenda, right, brother?
Oh no, you're absolutely right, and that's been one of my big things as the unpleasant blind guy has been that I've been a big freedom of speech guy. I mean, I'm even a I'm a freedom of all speech kind of guy, and was having this discussion on a panel show with Dan Butcher, who used to who used to host his own radio network, a great network it was too, and he was saying, well, how about the pedophiles that want to talk about that stuff and everything? I said, well, that's this, okay, to me, that's disgusting, okay? But in the public forums where you have stuff like that, you have the ability to just cut them off. The viewer has an ability to cut themselves off. Gab, I love Gab. It's great because it's 100% free speech. Now you have really good people in there. You also have anti-Semites, racists, individuals like that. And whenever I see one of their posts, I just block them, and then I don't have to see them anymore. But the control mechanisms that are all, at least in the states, based on that 100-year-old Supreme Court ruling, all right, are being used now to direct the people towards a particular set of politically correct values, if you want to call them values. And this is the sort of thing that we have to keep people apprised of, and we have to step on.
It's one thing for a person that doesn't want to hear something to mute, to block.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one thing, and that's everybody's right because you have the right to turn your channel, right?
Hmm.
This
Hmm.
is this is a fact for all people. I'm a firm believer in more speech, not less, because speech is the only thing that keeps. I compare it to a pressure cooker. You're boiling a chicken in a pressure cooker. You got that little tab, and that little tab will pop off to release all the pressure if it gets too heavy, too high.
Hmm.
And that makes sure everybody in the house doesn't get scolded walking by the stovetop. Okay,
Exactly.
um, that's what I mean by that. And free speech is paramount to keeping that pressure cooker from scalding everybody, popping off, from the steam pressure. Uh,
Yeah.
Here's the point, though. When the media is doing it, now think about this. You've got that chicken cooking, and the corporation comes in and welds that pressure relief valve to the top of it.
Hmm.
So it can't pop off. So what happens in the end of this? I'm talking basic breakdown on destabilization act.
Hmm.
Destabilization that's exactly what you've done. You've welded all of the pressure cooker's seals. So the only option's going to be for that pressure cooker to pop off, pop apart, break apart. I'm not going to use the words that people want me to use because that's just not going to be said, but we all know what the steam causes a problem when
Hmm.
it builds up dangerously and everybody gets scolded by it. And so corporations do not, and neither does a government, have a right to limit somebody's speech. Now you can observe it, you can watch it, you
Hmm.
can see if they've done something illegal doing it. But guess what? Once you do that, you are now part of a destabilization, whether you know it or not, as a corporation or as the government. And that is the reason why that's our First Amendment:
Hmm.
freedom to associate, freedom to speak, freedom of church. It's very basic what the First Amendment enumerates. And all those amendments, those are handcuffs to the government, what they
Hmm.
can't do.
Yeah.
But everybody, they just forget that. They just, oh no, they're a corporation. That's okay for them to do it. Well, okay. Uh, think about
That's.
think about Facebook's initial funding.
Mhm.
Initial funding for Facebook. I'm not bullshitting you. You can look it up. CIA, DARPA. It was called DARPA Net first. Then it
Oh yeah.
became, yeah. And I remember those days when we had DARPANET and
Oh yeah.
DoD. Oh yeah.
Hmm.
And
Me too.
yeah, and I remember all this garbage going back and when it was just EDUs, when
Oh
Facebook
yeah.
first started and everybody had the MySpace accounts. You know, these things I remember. And what they're doing now is purpose built. You have Google marching in lockstep. And Google, everybody forgets some of the players in this game. With Schmidt, you can go back to East Germany and find out there was another Schmidt, and you can figure out that he's related to him.
Mm.
Yeah, oh yeah. I did a
Well.
whole entire series of breakdowns on exactly how East Germany just came to America and
Oh
how
yeah.
the worst of Germany in the 20s we allowed to infect academia with Columbia,
Hmm.
with the other little place, and it was the Frankfurt School of Thought, Frankfurt, Germany. So, and that was communist thought. So
Right.
everything old is new, but
Hmm.
nobody sees it that way. They don't have the depth of perspective to understand that they're being played, dude. And in
Yeah.
this backbiting purity spiral bullshit, in all honesty, that's problematic because that is the downfall of a republic. And that's all I
Well,
have to
you're.
say.
Oh no, you're right. I mean, they're not seeing the forest for the trees. I mean, they're looking at the new iPhone with the cool new camera or whatever, and and they're looking at Alexa in the home, and they're looking at smart TVs, and they're going, "Oh wow, this is really cool and everything," and they're not understanding what these what these agencies, they're not just devices, they're agencies, are doing to the republic here. Um, and you're talking about also the death of personal responsibility, which there is sadly a segment of the population that likes that. They like for someone else to take responsibility. The only problem with that is that eventually that's going to turn around and bite them in the behind. Okay, because if the government is taking personal responsibility and being the big nanny, well, then they're going to require that everybody in the sandbox plays nice. All right, but that's not human nature. That's not the way it is. I'm going to say things that you disagree with. You're going to say things that I disagree with. I'm going to be kind of grating on some people. Other people are going to be kind of grating on me. That's life. That's the way life works. And it is our responsibility to then say, okay, you know what? You're a moron, but I'm going to just walk away. But this, what has happened has been exactly what you're talking about. That pressure valve has been welded closed. All right, and people have forgotten, and they've been allowed to forget that my rights, my rights stop where your body and your property begin. And that's just a basic right there. Yes, we have freedom of speech. Yes, we have freedom to express ourselves. Yes, we have freedom of religion. Okay. But that does not give us a carte blanche to go out there and, for instance, beat up a gay reporter in Portland
Right,
because we don't like what he has to say because we're, just rhetorically here, not you and I, but
right, right, right,
because we're a bunch of Antifa freaks.
right.
Okay, neither does it give us the right to run up on stage when let's say Elizabeth Warren is giving a speech and beat her up. All
Right.
right. Um, Rights belong to the individual, and those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that of course includes life, as I just said, and property. But
You have a
in order,
freedom. You have a freedom of speech,
hmm
but you have a right to free speech. Let me rephrase this.
hmm
but not a right to be heard. And what that means is if
Right.
I
That's it.
disagree with you, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
tuning into your channel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
care about your channel anymore. I won't listen to it. Okay, it's Moxnix. I have that ability and that responsibility to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if somebody else doesn't like mine, turn it off.
Yeah.
Go away. I don't care. And that's another thing. There's too many people that care what other people think about them.
Mm-hmm.
And once the three most freeing words, I've said it often and many, come shit or bleed, these are the three most freeing words to give you the most freedom, besides two words, and I'll follow up with them. I don't care. And the second most freeing words that actually complete the freedom matrix is fuck it. If you can do those three words and those two words, then you're free. And that's a fact.
Well, there's also hold my beer, but please continue.
Oh yeah. Hold my beer. That is the three words that are always going to lead to much laughter and merriment for somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So get ready to laugh. I've seen that in real life. This is back in the day. I'm going to take you on a trip. You brought this up, so you get to listen to this quick
Okay.
story. A buddy of mine, we're at a little club somewhere, and this is back when I was young, and he's like, "Hey, hold my beer. I'm gonna do something really awesome." And we
Okay.
look at him, and we're like, "Oh, this guy's a wild guy, fun guy. He's cool." I'll say his first name, Randy. And so Randy goes up. He tells us what his intent was later. But he leaps on it. They had these little round tables that were, how bars were back in the day, the big tall chairs and the big tall things right next to the dance floor. He leaps onto it, but there's all these drinks. He didn't calculate that people would have drinks on there. And so as he slides across this wet table, because of course drinks and whatnot, with cowboy boots on, and skids off of it, throwing all those bottles onto the dance floor, and then hits the dance floor, still skidding. And we're like, what the hell? People are cussing him. He ends up getting thrown out, and we follow him out. We're like, what the hell was that? He goes, I was just going to jump from the table onto the dance floor and bust my funky moves. And we're like, dude, it was funny as hell, but look where we're at now in the parking lot. So, taking personal responsibility, illuminated, and we
Mm-hmm.
we still to this day, every time we see him, watch this. That's what we always say. Watch this. And of course, it didn't pan out the way he wanted to, but there you go. So that's my story on Hold My Beer, Watch
Uh,
This.
there you are. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, and they fodder for many a funny YouTube video. But no, the getting back to an earlier point of yours, the satirist, she's 14 or 15 years old at this point. The young satirist named Soph, it brought this up. Your point. I don't care. Okay. Um, too many people have practically their lives connected to their social media presence and what people think of them. And this is another very dangerous thing on a political level, too. Okay. Because once you begin to allow the mob, or in some cases the culture, but definitely the mob and absolutely the media, to be your guide as far as behavior goes, and as far as what you should think and how you should vote and things like that goes, you're in trouble. And when you begin to deviate from that for whatever reason, all right, you might be a conservative that's concerned with the disintegration of the American family, which is a big problem. You might be a leftist that wants to see the poor get more money off the money tree from the magical money tree that they know is out there, right? Um, you know, you might be either one of those, okay? But when you express that, and someone else comes up and says, "Hey, this is wrong. You shouldn't say that." Too many people nowadays say, "Oh well, you know what? Let me change my mind here." No, oh no, no, no. I apologize. I shouldn't have said that I stand with Hong Kong. As general manager of the Houston Rockets, please forgive me for that. No, I I agree with you, Kaiser. People need to stand on their own morals and their own ethics, right? And if even if you whether you stand with a couple of million people or a couple of thousand people or a couple of hundred or even if you stand alone, that has to be this is what I'm saying to your listeners and to mine. Even if you stand alone, it has to be yours because in the end it's just you and God. That's
That,
all.
that's it. I'm accountable to two people, my wife and my God. And if there's something out there that everybody sees that I don't care about, they can say what they want about it because I know the facts and they don't. But that's all in a day's work for me.
Yeah,
And that's in all honesty, I've been called, I'm very public because I do a lot of recruiting for different, things. And so I am a public face on certain things because there's, just different things happen. And I guess I facilitate things. But here's the problem. Because of that, I know I'm a lightning rod. And guess what? I don't care. Fuck it. And that's the difference. And the difference is what matters.
it is.
There's something about successful people that I've found in my travels, and I mean this very, very heartily. And I'm talking some of these people are successful in businesses and shit that I disagree with wholeheartedly, but I've met them and talked with them. And the one thing you find that's common is they're going to get their job done no matter what it takes, no matter how it makes them look, and they get it done. That's the measure of success. The measure of success is not brown nosing, finding your way to the top, sleeping around or something. No, the measure of success is how are your peers, those people that actually know and work with you, how do they feel about you? How do they think about you? Do they hold you in high regard? Or are they just sycophants that lapdog you? See, this is where things become problematic. But people who actually are successful, they don't care about any of that. If I've had people try to brown nose me on different things, and I'm like, dude, stop it. You don't have to. Let's just see how you do your thing, and that's it. Do your job, fuck. Do your job or go home.
Well, yeah, yeah. Thank you, Coach Belichick. Yeah, do your job. That's what he says. Um, and it's really interesting. If anybody's ever seen the old movie, and I've never watched it all the way through, but I understand the concept. The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. The guy who wrote that movie worked for a corporation, and he came up with the whole idea for the movie because he noticed everyone, sadly, including himself, were jockeying for position just so they could help the boss into his coat at night. Okay, there you go. They weren't worried about their own success or their success was tied to him to the boss. All right, they weren't worried about or they weren't concerned or they weren't ready to go out on their own and make a success. They just had to brown nose the boss.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. This is an old player. I got it from him. This is years ago. Not getting into specifics on who this gentleman is, but he played for a college team that's in my area, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Okay, and the Ohio State University. Anyways, he was given a book, and I have that book, and it's by Woodrow Wilson Hayes, Woody Hayes, and it's everything I know about football. That's the name of the book.
Yeah.
And you know what you do when you open it up to the first page? He had these printed and he gave them to all the players.
Right.
so they would all know what his feelings were on everything he knows about football. All the pages were blank. And that's what I say. Every day is a new day. We had a saying in the Marine Corps, Semper Gumby, Semper Flexible.
Mm.
Every fucking day is a new day. And it's going to present unique and extraordinary issues sometimes. And you know what you say to it? Okay, let's take care of the, the small shit. The big shit will work itself out.
Well, I
And
find that
that's the way to work it.
no, I find that actually a great way for a warrior to think. Okay, because it's not going to be just a static situation when you're in a combat situation. You know the old saying, "No battle plan survives actual contact with the enemy." When it's in your face, it's going to be different, and you have to be flexible. Or even I know this, who have never served. You have to be flexible, or you're going to die. Even I know this. Now, Kaiser, I'm going to have to take care of something for about 2 or 3 minutes. If you want to kind of do a little bit of a monologue, I'll be right back with you. Okay?
Sure, that sounds fine, Dave.
Yeah. All right.
Folks, you're listening to Dave Milner from The Unpleasant Blind Guy. Um, you can see he's a great guy. He's not unpleasant at all. It's a bum rap they gave him, but it is a funny story, and he'll tell you about it if he wants to. You just listen to his program. He also does things for the EDL channel. I don't know what exactly where that's at, but and what to do. I mean, I know it's on Spreaker, I think. It may be on YouTube, but I'll ask him when he comes on where to find it. But as you can see, he's a regular guy just like you and I. I don't know his religion. I've never really asked him. I should ask him that. But who really cares? It's religion's religion. Yeah, But the point is that you've heard some disagreement. But did you ever hear a coarse word said? Did you ever hear me name call or him name call? No. Guess why? This is the way people talk to each other, and have always talked to each other until this current crop of social justice. And if you think you're on the right and there's no social justice garbage, ask yourself, when's the last time you were able to speak freely and not feel that you have to self-censor yourself? Look, self-censoring, you're in normalization. At that point, when you have to worry about what you say, how it's perceived by others, and you have to worry about that, and you can't speak naturally, shit, then you got a problem.
Truth
And
is not always pleasant.
that's right. And
That's
hey,
my
Dave,
that's my slogan.
I was going to tell you um, two things I just presented to the audience I never ever ask you about. And so I'm going to ask you two things. Uh, where to find the EDL and the other channels that you do. I couldn't remember if it was just on Spreaker or on YouTube. I can't remember. And the other thing was, and if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. What religion you are? Because I don't think I've ever asked you those two questions on the three
well,
podcast.
well, it's interesting. I'll take the second first. All right,
Okay.
because I'm just that kind of a guy.
Well,
Um, the what religion am I? Well, I'm trying to be a Christian. Now, a lot of people say, well, I'm a Christian, right?
right.
And I'm not beefing with anybody who says I'm a Christian. Okay, I'm not beefing with them. This is just what I have to do for myself when I say I'm trying to be a Christian,
Right.
because as any Christian knows, Satan is always out there doing his job,
Oh yeah.
and it's a struggle every day to maintain your Christianity and to try and be a good Christian. So
Oh yeah.
that's why I say I'm trying to be a Christian. Okay,
Right.
that's the religion that I have at this point. Now,
Good. You there?
yep, still here. Just had to
Okay.
just had to fire up a smoke and didn't want that noise.
Oh, okay.
Now, I had to mute the mic for a second. Um, now, where to find my stuff? Okay, that is slightly more complicated.
Yep.
Yeah,
Com-
it is. I'll have to tell a little bit of a story about that. Now,
okay.
I did unpleasant blind guy episodes for about 6 years,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was strictly the unpleasant blind guy, and I also did EDL radio, on the side.
Right.
I was doing 3 shows a week, 2 EDL radio shows. I was part of the team. Jeff Mitchell is the host. So I was doing those, and I was doing unpleasant blind guy episodes as well each week. Now, what I was finding
Right.
was that had me working every day. I realized that I had no free days, that I wasn't working on a show, editing a show, prepping for a show. Um, the free time was just completely gone. I mean, it was an actual job, like a 9 to 5 job at that point. So I did some praying on this because it was wearing me down. Um, there was again, you can't just live doing this stuff. You have to have other interests outside of making commentary and things of that nature. You just have to in order to
Ain't
be a
that the
complete person.
fucking truth? Ain't
Yeah.
that the fucking truth? Spit that truth again. You have to have other interest other than this bullshit. Yeah, right on, brother.
Mm-hmm. 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 Exactly. It took me some time to figure this out, and also because I saw another person who well, wasn't exactly a friend when they left us, but who had been a friend, and I watched that individual grind themselves down to practically nothing because that's all they did. And of course, I had also experienced this a little bit earlier on when I was extremely active in the National Federation of the Blind here in the United States. Um, and by the way, I always have to say the NFB has absolutely nothing to do with any program that I put on. Okay, but I was a member. I was extremely active.
Right, right.
Um, and in a sense, I'm kind of still a member. It's kind of like being a Marine, Kaiser. Once you're in for life. Um,
Yeah, unfortunately, I have that tag not just from the Marine Corps, but from federal LEO and other things I've done. So yeah, yeah,
mhm.
you're in for life whether you want to be or not.
Yeah, exactly. Now, but even back then, in my late 20s and early 30s, I noticed that beginning to take over my life, and I had to pull back from that considerably. Doesn't mean that I don't still steer people there when they need help in that area, but flashing forward to the end of 2018 when I took my Christmas break. I prayed on this a lot, and I just said, okay, I've got no free time here, and I'm working myself to a frazzle, and I'm not getting any sleep or anything like that. So I decided I formulated a plan. Well, again, this is I like to think this is with God's help. I formulated the plan that what I would do would be to do the unpleasant blind guy on EDL radio. So now I just do 2 shows a week with Jeff Mitchell of the English Defense League radio show, and this was partly because at the same time Jeff is having some breathing issues and he needs a little bit more help with the program. So I'm happy to do that. He asked me for help, and you don't punk out on a friend who asks you for help.
Exactly.
Okay. Um, so I said, you know what? I think we can work something out. And now um, I do the Unpleasant Blind Guy on EDL radio. I help Jeff out with 2 shows a week. And then those shows are generally 90 minutes long. The one yesterday was 2 hours long, and we still didn't get to everything. But I will take those shows once they're finished. The English Defense League radio show, for anyone who's interested, podcasts live. Okay, this is where you can hear me live on Thursdays and Sundays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern in the United States. That's 8:30 p.m. in the UK. All right, so if you want to hear me live, Thursdays and Sundays, 8:30 p.m. on Blog Talk Radio, the English Defense League radio show. That is when that happens. Okay, then I'll take those shows.
Right.
And this is why I was up yesterday this is why I started yesterday at about 3 p.m. and why I finished up about 11 p.m. I take those shows and I split them apart into 3 show segments, and I put those up at the Unpleasant Blind Guy page at Spreaker.com. And my show times are still the same. It's going to be the same when I rebroadcast this episode or this show as 1 or 2 Unpleasant Blind Guy shows. Okay. The show times are going to be 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, and midnight on Saturday. And that's what's going to happen with this show is midnight Saturday. I know you'll get it up and get it finished here today now, and
Right.
And it'll be out as an Unpleasant Blind Guy show at midnight on Saturday, and that can be heard at Spreaker.com at the Unpleasant Blind Guy page. Now, my stuff can also be heard on the Western Free Radio Network and on the SHR Media YouTube page. It's a little bit complicated, but it's a way that I could get everything done and still get enough time to turn around and scratch my butt.
And that is why you are the man, Dave Milner. You're the man. I have enjoyed every show we've done. Now, you just gave me a big opening. Folks, this is the first time, because I'm gonna ask him to do exactly this. Whatever you weren't able to do, let's finish the show with you going on about those subjects. Out of that 2 hours you weren't able to get to certain subjects, you know what? You're in Kaiser's Castle, the safety of my parapets all around me. You see my big orange couch. You see the people sitting on there drinking their coffee, tea, soda, or their adult libation. Mm-hmm. And having a good time. There was a friend of mine who stopped over the other day and said, God damn, you do have a big orange couch. And I said, yeah, it just happens to be burnt orange, baby. And he starts laughing. So the point is, we like to keep it light. We like to keep it fun. And I think we've had a light, fun show. But Dave,
it's been good.
If you want to talk about some of those things, let the folks in Kaiser's Castle have a little inkling into a taste of what you do on EDL.
Well, I gotta say that your show did allow me to do that one last thing, just without the audio clip, about the Philadelphia 76ers and what happened with those people that were thrown out and that sort of thing, and my reaction to it. I mean, it's been a great opportunity, and I appreciate it. I very much appreciate you and that you had me on my show, or that you had me on your show, and that and that I have this opportunity. But I have to say, you have a burnt orange couch. Now, burnt orange is the color of the University of Texas, but you're an OSU fan, so what the hell's up with that?
Well, let me tell you a little secret on the burnt orange couch. We had an actual super orange couch, which I'll tell you about. That was like a half moon shape. That was even bigger than this one. Mm-hmm. It took up most of our living room. Well, onward comes my son getting into his terrible 2s and 3s. And right. This thing was circa 1970 whatever, maybe 60. So it had the fake ornate little whatever. My wife's grandmother died, and we inherited this monstrosity.
Right.
And like I said, it was a circle, pretty much, a half circle.
Well, let me interrupt you just for a second, Kaiser. Yeah. Now, are we talking about an entire couch in one piece like the monstrosity I have in my living room, or are we talking about a sectional couch? Because you know what they say about sectional sofas. They're actually called sexual sofas.
Oh,
just so you can get an occasional piece.
yeah, it's
But go
it's
ahead.
it's like a love seat. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it was a nice couch, but our 3-year-old son, who's now in the Marine Corps and doing well for himself,
Uh,
and is
Excellent.
in his 20s, but at
Congratulations
two,
to him.
3, 4, he would always hold on to those fake ornate pieces and bounce on the couch. So you started getting messed up parts of the couch until it finally, one of my dogs, I guess, Max left his scent there or something from a diaper. I don't know. We got another dog, and this dog decided to burrow into it
Oh, yes.
in a couple spots while the wife and I were both at work. And so there I am merrily rolling parts of that couch down to get picked up by the trash collectors. This is a for real story. Everybody's looking at me like, what the hell? Well, it's half circle or quarter circle, when you broke it down
Hmm.
from the two pieces. And but I did have to roll it. The thing was heavy as hell. I mean, it was. I'm shocked. If it wasn't for the dog, that thing would probably still be here.
Hmm.
So we had like 4 other incarnations of couches. There was a striped couch with different colors. Anyway, so the in-laws decided to get rid of their couch they got. And my wife says, "Well, we haven't had a couch for a couple years." And so we inherited this one. They're still alive, but so we drop it in here and it's held up in good stead and the dogs haven't screwed it up and it looks good and it's burnt orange. So that's how the two incarnations of the big orange couch came about. Now, the actual phraseology of that, there was an old advertisement for, I think it was a chain of them across the U.S. They were called the Elephant Bar.
Hmm.
And the Elephant Bar was in the 80s. It played a lot of new wave music and cool stuff. I used to punk music, stuff I listened to
Yeah,
when I
there you
was
go.
young.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Depeche Mode.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Depeche Mode, exactly. And also, like I think the last time I was there, they were playing a major mix of oh, what's that guy? He sang the Born song. I can't think of his name now. Um,
The
shoot,
Bourne song.
yeah, Jason Bourne song, the first Jason Bourne, Moby,
Uh,
Moby.
okay, go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, got it.
So the last incarnation was that was the last time I ever went to that place.
Hmm.
Anyways, but it wasn't Jason Bourne song, but it was Moby when he first got out there. And anyways, their commercial was, "Come in and take a seat on the big orange couch at the Elephant Bar." And they had like an inflatable big ass orange couch. So
Hmm.
there you go. That's the chronology and how that theater of the mind, folks, in radio, but sometimes that theater is based in fact.
Well, when you listen to these podcasts, just as when people used to listen to radio, you have to have that theater of the mind. You have to imagine certain things, and my God, I definitely feel your pain. My couch, I've got this giant green couch in my living room that my stepson or would be stepson inherited, and they had to take out a window to get this bloody thing in here. And at this point, there's no way I can get it out. I'm going to have to bring a chainsaw in and just saw this thing in half if I ever want to get rid of it because it literally can't come out the door. So that's it's almost like getting socialism in your country. You really can't get it out unless there's a whole lot of pain involved. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. Now I will give you one suggestion, my brother. Don't use a chainsaw. Too much wood chips.
Wood chips, yeah.
Yeah, get yourself a sawzall and cut that son of a bitch right down the middle and also up the back and the front. Look, I had to actually do that with the big orange couch. So the first
Hmm.
incarnation of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, I had to. That was some work getting out, and I was the only one doing it. I got the wife was covering up the bore holes for like I don't know a week or two, she was like, "Oh, we'll just cover them up and putting like our Mexican blankets on from when we went on our honeymoon down to Cancun." And
Sure, sure.
so she's throwing these over them, and I'm like, "This shit's going out." And we lived without a couch for a little bit, but then I can't remember what happened, but somebody died and we got another couch. That was the striped couch. So yeah, I don't really care what kind of couch. I don't even care if we have one, but I've got my lazy boy, and I've got
Oh, there you
nice.
go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I like to pretend I'm sitting on my lazy boy now, but I'm actually on a rolling chair that squeaks. I'm sure everybody, all the audio files are like, Jesus Christ, every time he rocks in the son of a bitch, we hear it creak. So probably sounds like I'm farting, but
Oh, oh yeah. Well,
that's what they'll say.
it's
Brap.
the same with me in this area, with this chair I've got. And it it is a good one, or at least it was when I first got it. But now it's begun to degrade, and yeah, it makes noises and everything. But it does have good back support, which in this business, people, you listen to this. Um, we'll be in these chairs for hours. Whether it's just doing the shows, or in both of our cases, editing the shows, which for me, editing the shows can take a lot longer. Like I said, I stayed in this chair yesterday from about 3 p.m. Right up until about 11.
Wow.
So yeah, so you've got to have a comfortable chair. If anybody out there is thinking about doing their own podcast, one of the first things you do, get a microphone? No. Get a mixer? No. Get a comfortable chair. Get something that you can that you're going to be comfortable spending half a day in, because that's where you're going to be.
And get yourself a good desk. For years,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I still have to put the desk I have now, but for years I was off of um oh, what do you call it, one of them folding desk, that
Right.
just folds like you would use camping, and that's why I bought it, was for camping. But once I decided to podcast, well, I guess it's going on 2 years now, so yeah. So until about, I don't know, I got back from Germany, I found this beautiful desk. I love it. And I put it in here, but I still had to put two bricks under it, on the front and the back, just to get it up to the proper height. And that's really what happened, brother. Uh,
Well, yeah, I got to tell you, man. If I had the money, I would have this transferred up here, because right now the desk I've got is just kind of a decorative thing. But I've got down in Texas in storage, um, something that a friend of mine picked up for me at a university auction, the UT University of Texas Austin auction. It is a circa 1950s, almost standard issue military desk. It's got the little slides out the side there on the top for the typewriters
oh
on both
yeah,
sides.
I remember them. Yeah.
It's got the file drawer. It's got the other two drawers. The thing's made out of steel.
Yep.
It weighs about 8,000 pounds. But man, what a desk! I
And
really wish I could have
gray
that.
in color or green. They come in two
Green.
colors. Yeah, green or gray.
Yep, yep, yep. Mine was the green. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Great.
I still have my IBM Selectric. Believe this or
Mm,
not, most of the stuff I bang out when I've written articles or whatever, I still
yeah.
use my IBM.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm working on my book, and I'm trying to do everything by Word now because I guess it's easier, but it's funny as fuck. Every time, uh, uh, it just there's something about the smell of the ribbon, the smell of the paper, that tactile feel. When I was here's something that'll blow you away about the youth. This last time, and it was the last time, when I was in Afghanistan this last time last year. Um, the interesting part to me was I send letters out, and they're like, "Why are you always, when we go to the DFAC, why are you always stopping over at that letterbox and sending out letters?"
hmm
I'm like, "Because, I'm sending out letters to the people, I write to." And they're like, "Well, why don't you just use email?" I said, I can do that if I want, but there's something about the tactile feel, the the writing process, and you knowing this is your handwriting, going to these people you actually give a fuck about, and putting down your thoughts instead
it's
of the cheap plastic banana. Even a Selectric. I wouldn't have written. I don't think I've ever written a letter to somebody that wasn't handwritten.
mhm.
An actual letter. I don't think I've ever typed one out.
Well, I've again, this is a skill that they taught us at one of the schools that I went to. For blind kids. So I learned how to touch type by the time I was 10 years old, and I learned on these large format Underwood typewriters. Now, I'm not saying that these were regular sized typewriters that had, some kind of printer on the back that printed things large. No, the keyboard was the same size. Okay, but the hammers and everything else, all the other guts and works were in large format. We're
Okay,
talking about large type here.
right.
Okay, and by the end of a lesson, by the end of an hour lesson every day, my hands would just ache. But I got to where I could type really, really well. It probably by the time I got out of the fourth grade, I could probably pass any secretarial school's typing test. In fact, this comes to a story. When I went to high school, they told me, well, you got to take an elective. I'm like, nah, I don't take an elective. So I said, okay, fine, typing. All right, I'll take that. I know I'll ace that. And it was the one time that a teacher ever went to my counselor and said, okay, get this kid out of my class. He doesn't need it.
Here's one for you. You'll love this. When I was going through, typing my stuff for college and whatnot. Who cares about that? I find it funny. Uh, they had just started introducing computers. I had to actually take CPT courses. Now, I was playing around with computers back when Realistic had their Radio Shack had their I think it was a 2600 Radio Shack
uh,
2600.
Not you mean the TI 100?
Yeah, TI 100. Well, no,
Right.
I think it was a later incarnation. I think it was like 2600 or something.
Did it have the LCD screen? That'll be the key. Did it have the
It had
LCD
a
screen?
TV. It had a TV monitor.
Oh, okay. Then it might have been a later number. But go ahead.
Okay. It had a TV, not a TV, but it looked like the old. Remember how the old
Green
TVs
screen.
had the? Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
it was still we were still using that first incarnation of dark green and light green on the
Hmm.
screen. It was called oh hell, what the hell was that shit called? Anyway, this is in junior high, so this is
Right.
early '80s,
Oh, sure.
and anyway, so we went through that incarnation. Then they added color to it, and that was called
That was the Coco, the color computer. I had one.
yeah. And then I got in '86. I'll never forget how much it cost.
Mhm.
I bought a Macintosh, the first Mac with a mouse, and it came with a carry case. I've talked about it on one of my shows before. It was a
Ah.
brown carry case with like a rainbow on it, and it was a one-piece unit. And I had to buy an extra floppy disk when discs were actually still floppy, the old 8-inch or 6-inch disc.
Yep. 8 inch disc. Yeah.
Yeah, and but before that, now with the realistic that we used at school, you actually used a cassette tape.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, and anyways that was interesting during those times. And one thing I'll tell you about the government, guess what? They still use that original green screen as their base. And then you can do the little color screen when they started adding color. And you can take your Word document, your pictures and whatnot, and then you just take the picture, you put it over there in your different F keys, and
Hmm.
so that's really where we went with that. But I honestly was clueless about computers by the time I really had to know them, and I got real good at typing with my right hand only, and
Right.
the reason why was if you look at police cars or any cars that deal with stuff,
Oh
um,
yeah, yeah.
it has a computer. Well, I still have a computer just like the one I had, but it's not the same one. I actually bought this. It cost $6,000 when I bought it, and
Hmm.
it was one of those tough books by Panasonic.
Right.
And like I said, my computer guy's aces. He's kept this damn thing alive for this many years, and it still works. But
Hmm.
uh, you would have to input the information, for whatever you just did, and it was sitting in your car, and I had different little mounts, and then I got away from mounts, tucked it under the seat, and I had a car plug in. I still have the car plug in and shit like that, and then I would just be able to type it, then upload it when I get back. But yeah, I still find myself relying one-handedly with my right hand. I'm right-handed too, so the only thing I can do is smoke when I type. But I'm faster typing one-handed than I am with two.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, my first one. This gives you an idea of my background. Obviously, I've said this to you before. I started in December of 1991 on
Wow.
the internet. On the internet. Okay,
Okay.
that's when I started on the internet using a Morrow MD3 CPM computer and one of the green screen monitors. The using a let's see, I think it was an ADM2 or ADM12 dumb terminal to hook up to the MD3. But my first computer, in those, by the way, used 5 1/4 inch floppy disks. So it was that far advanced at that point in 1991. But my first computer, my very first computer, was a Timex Sinclair 1000. It was this little one-piece unit. You guys can look this up if you want. This little one-piece unit that had this bubble keyboard, and yes, it did use a TV as its monitor, and yes, it did have cassette memory. If you wanted to save anything, you had to save it to cassette. Um, and of course, it had that audio interface so they could bring it back. You could load a program using cassettes. Um,
Were you still using, that was the program I forgot, DOS. That was the initial
oh,
program was DOS, and then the color one was something else. I can't remember.
well, as far as Radio Shack goes, yeah, they had. Yeah, it was. I'm not even sure that those early ones used DOS, but I think it used a. They might have used a permutation of it. I can remember, the first actual PC I got was an IBM AT, and yes, it did use DOS, and I got very good at DOS. I wound up. Um, I really went to Windows reluctantly because
Oh
at that
yeah,
point I was using 4DOS and I had Norton Utilities. I
yep.
mean, I was using the thing like a boss. And when I'd play computer games, I would play these games that would just that had that had the interface that would just take over the entire system and use all the system's memory to play those things like Duke Nukem 3D and everything like that.
Yeah,
But
DOS, I remember one thing that I did love about it was the functionality with the F keys. I
hmm
mean, you could flip screens, you could do everything you needed to do, and that's why the government honestly kept that. And it is the most secure form for the intranet, not the internet. The government has something that, is
sure.
secured, and it's the intranet. So, well, secure as it can be, because remember, I have like four different letters from just about everywhere under Obama. The Chinese had access to everybody's information, and it was like
hmm
45 million people, and they were looking for family lines. That's important, and I'll tell you why another time, maybe, or maybe we'll get into it today.
To support spies, I'm guessing. But
Oh
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly why. And anybody who's worked in the government knows you have to change your password at a minimum every 90 days, and usually
Hmm.
they're trying to sweat you to do it more often than that, like 45
Oh yeah.
days or whatever, 30 days. And so, anyways, the point is for them to have had that for 2 years meant somebody on the inside was giving them access. And that's probably the when you think about the what I used to call, now it's called the deep state, but back in the day we called it the shadow government.
Yep, I still
And
do.
yep, me too. And the shadow government, somebody gave them access. And I guess I'll jump into why they want that information, because usually families who serve in the military or in the government had other family members serve in it, and it's predictive programming. Just like with everything else, they're like, okay, so your son or your daughter will go in the military. There's a heavy evolution of that. And the reason why they took that information is just data mining and predictive programming, and that's it. And that's all I had to say on that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. And yeah, it goes again right back to China, who is trying to be a great nation on its own. And again, if we don't watch ourselves, they very well could be the 21st century could well belong to them. Yeah.
Everybody forgets the famous photo of when he went over to meet with Chavez, Obama.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Remember the New American Century book that he had under his arm? Or did you ever hear about that picture or see it?
I don't think I ever heard about that picture. I heard reference to it, but I don't believe I ever saw it.
Okay. Well, that picture was blown up to show it. Now, the New American Century, when you actually read the book, most people don't read books because, that tactile feel. They're young, they want to see other things.
Right.
That book is about the New American Century, but guess what? It doesn't include us. It's the New American Century from south of the border.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's called a New American Century.
Well,
And
that's
it's muff fake. That's what this bullshit with the Frankfurt School and all that shit,
mm-hmm.
Columbia and the media, that's how you do it. You just rename it, rebrand it, and you call it something else. And guess what? There you go, baby.
Well, yeah. Everything that's old is new again. But sadly, you have people who don't pay attention to history and really don't know about what has gone before, and that's why we keep making the same mistakes. That's why you heard me talking to Jeff Mitchell when I heard this news about us pulling out of Syria. That's why my mind went to Vietnam. And but the problem is that someone that might be a third my age, somebody 20 years old, they have no experience with that, so that wouldn't occur to them immediately. They go somewhere else because they don't have that uh, experiential background, but they don't even have they barely have the historical background. Because, well, for one thing, very likely if they learned anything about Vietnam in school, it was probably the wrong thing. I learned about Vietnam from guys who'd been there, and that's a big difference. Yeah.
No, I agree. I remember back in the day, um, told a little lie to my mother when I was doing Boy Scouts and told her, oh, there's this great school I want to go to. And I got to go to it. Yeah, I think it was like $600, which was a lot of money back then. She signed a little permission slip. Uh, there was a school, it was called a Recondo school. And this is, I don't know how old I was, 16. This is before I went in the military, I know that. And this dude who ran it, his name was Frank Camper. And it was a cool school. He was shocked that I lied about my age and shit like that. He didn't ask for no ID or nothing. But I remember this. It was hilarious. I went through the school. I still got the books. The one I wrote in, and I bought a second one to keep. And I still have that one that I wanted to keep. And basically, it was a school to, teach you how to be a soldier or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. People call it lots of things, people. But then later on, while I was in the military, I get a visit by CID because my name came up on a list going to that school, which is fact. And they're like, "Why'd you go to it?" And I was like, "I was in Boy Scouts." Well, you remember when Gaddafi, um, they said that these terrorists were coming in to train to do some problems for our president. They went through that school. Guy's name was Frank Camper. So you can find the book online, I'm sure. Maybe they don't sell it, I don't know, but who knows? Maybe you can find it. And it was called Recondo, Live to Spend It. That was his little guidebook for the school.
Well, yeah, there you go, and that's just something for UBG listeners. Another reference for you guys if you want to go and do that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that school doesn't exist, and Frank Camper turned out he didn't do no time. He got convicted of something, but did no time because he
Hmm.
was a CIA agent.
Right.
And that whole entire school was set up by the CIA in the U.S. So when people say by law you can't go through a school, uh, or you can't do some, the CIA can't operate in the U.S., I'm here to tell you that's bullshit. They do it all the time. And just reasons I know this, but it's pretty fucked up. And when you hear about the IC and all the shit
Hmm.
they're pulling right now, this is old hat. This is gamesmanship. Anyways, let's get off that subject because I don't want to. I touched lightly on it. I don't want to go too deep. And I'll go down that fucking rabbit hole, and I don't need to.
Well, I hear you, man. I hear you. It is something that people need to know about. They need to understand. People say, "Well, it's all conspiracy theory stuff." Yeah, that really worked until government agencies actually began admitting that they perpetrated some of these conspiracies that they did happen. The most glaring of which was the one where um, the IRS went after the Tea Party movement, and they kept saying, "Oh no, we're not doing that. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's conspiracy theory nonsense." And then once the Obama administration was over, they rather quietly came out and said, "Yeah, we were doing that.
And
Yeah, we were."
notice
Hmm.
Lois Lerner, that cunt. She's still free.
Still free. That was
Still
the point
free
that I
as
was
a
going to make.
bird. Oh
That was
yeah.
Yeah, yep. That was the point I was going to make. Yeah, to quote someone else, guilty as hell and free as a bird.
Fucking yeah. All I got to say, man, is Trump's doing the best he can at unwinding this shit, and there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle.
Hmm.
Good, bad, come shit or bleed, indifferent.
Hmm.
Um, I've talked about it before on my shows. I can talk about it now. There was an internal civil war within the IC, cold and hot. Now it's cold again,
Hmm.
and competing, competitive, I guess is the best way to put it. But like I said, it did get hot for a minute. But the point is, when you have this shit going on, there's a reason why the guy who signed the ability for not the military intelligence, but for us to have a civilian intelligence agency, i.e., the CIA,
Right.
when you had him, I believe it was Eisenhower,
Hmm.
come out and say, I wish I never would have formed that organization,
Right.
you might want to think about that.
Eisenhower was a very thoughtful president,
Yep.
and there was that, and he also. Now, this is one of the things that I find interesting, because the left always goes to his speech about the military-industrial complex, but what they won't admit was that included academia. He didn't say it in that speech, but it did. The left will never bring that up,
Well,
but he
where's the
he
head
meant
of
them too.
where's the head of DARPA? It's in Massachusetts because most of it's
Hmm.
from MIT,
Right.
Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Uh, the fact remains, it's look, it's inane, it's bullshit, but whatever. I'm the foremost expert on my own opinion, but my opinion has proven to be right numerous times.
Hmm.
Uh, but what I will tell you is you're exactly right. Academia is included. The military complex is also, and this is what the left will never say either. How'd we get to the moon? Who was von Braun? Who was
Mm-hmm.
DeBus?
Mm-hmm.
Who was Kurt Debus?
Mm-hmm.
What about the Kecksville incident and the Bell? These little conspiracy theories, but they're facts. They
Mm-hmm.
happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's witnesses. Uh, the oral traditions of different things. I live 45 minutes from Wright Pat, where the
Right.
Bell is encased. It's actually encased somewhere. That's fact because there's numerous truck drivers that made reports. But that's kooky bullshit. But then all of a sudden now you have the Navy saying, yeah, there are things coming in that we have no idea why, and they even released the gun footage. And Joe Rogan interviewed one of the pilots. And think about it. Everything's not Bob Lazar. A lot of this stuff is man-made. The skunk works exist for a reason.
Oh, definitely.
Area
Definitely.
51 exists for a reason. And if we ain't doing that, then we're fucking up as a nation because we better have the best shit because we no longer have the big manpower.
Mm-hmm.
We've raised a bunch of buttercups that
Right.
probably wouldn't take up a gun if they were forced to. And their feelings might get hurt by the recoil. It might be too loud for their little earsies. You know, uh, that's the whole point of this. In the military industrial complex, there's your industrial complex, NASA.
Mm-hmm.
It was
That's part of
founded
it.
by Nazis. Cut
Well,
point and blank.
yeah, something occurs to me talking about Eisenhower. Do you think that, at least obliquely, in that speech, or at least at the time, because remember when I was talking about the fact that we haven't made proper war in 75 years, you have to remember who he was and what he did in World War II. I have a feeling that he regretted. He was handed this poop on a plate from from the Truman administration. But I have a feeling that he regretted it, that it had become that way, but that even he didn't have the power to turn it back to the way it should be. That's just a feeling I have. It may be complete BS, but that's a feeling I have.
No, from his accounts, I would say you're spot on. From his accounts, he felt a serious problem with the way things went on. And remember, generals are politicians. They are. They
Mm-hmm.
actually have a school at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and it's the the War College, which we were talking about earlier when I was
Right.
talking about the white papers by intellectuals like Condi Rice. And
Mm-hmm.
dude, when I read that paper, it said Condoleezza Rice. I didn't know it was a woman. I'm like, Jesus Christ! I remember being a young troop in the army,
Mm-hmm.
reading these things because they would have them in the fucking uh, day room. You know, all the military propaganda, the military police journal, all these things. And I used to just read them, on my off time. And it was pretty fascinating, actually. The way I talk with my mentors, I'm like, it's amazing uh, what what you. Anyways, it is what it is. But the point is I find it hilarious that now the military. We used to have something when I left the army and went to the Marine Corps. Um, I found it really funny that now everything's this AKO, the Army Knowledge Office or whatever the hell AKO means. You have to take all these online things, but there's ways to do it real quick, and you don't really learn anything, but you have to do it. You have to punch that fucking card and, have that, even as contractors. There are certain things we have to take on that bullshit. Well, here's the point. Back in the day, we actually read the material and knew it. And for some reason, it changed. And I think that is the problem with technology also. I'm not averse to technology. Please don't get me wrong, folks. I think it's a good thing and it can be used for good. But I'm not seeing a lot of good being used with it. And your thoughts on that there, Dave?
Well, I don't go quite as far as our friend BZ does. I don't think that Grace Hopper should have been disappeared or anything like that. Admiral Grace Hopper now. Um, I don't think that should have happened, but technology, like anything else, is a tool, and it's a tool that is extremely powerful, and it's been misused horribly at this point. And the only way that I can see that you can ride herd on this and make sure that it doesn't do harm to the people is to have elected officials looking at this stuff. Elected officials who are accountable to the people. One of the main problems,
Accountable.
right?
That's the key. Accountable and honest.
Exactly.
But Mr. Smith has not gone to Washington in a long time, unless you want to consider. Uh, thank God he's from my state, Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan.
Well,
He's the Mr. Smith of our era.
Well, even another guy from your state, even James Trafficant, who sadly kind of fell down there at the end.
Hell yeah, I love
He was
James.
a good yeah, he was a good guy. He always supported us, with the NFB. When we would do what we would call Washington seminars, we'd go up to D.C. and lobby, for whatever we wanted, and we'd hit both parties. I did that 3 or 4 times in the late '80s and early '90s. Um, James Trafficant, when our guys from our Ohio affiliate would go in there, he would say, "Hey, how you doing? Great to see you. What do you need? You got it. I'll co-sponsor it." That was
Well,
that was James Trafficant right there.
people forget about James Trafficant. I'll tell you two things that I do know about that man.
Mm.
He would be the one when C-SPAN was the thing that followed Congress and should have been the only thing that ever followed Congress, not all the other news outlets and stuff and how they
Exactly.
weaponized it.
Hmm.
But C-SPAN, you got to see how the gravy was made. And
Yeah.
consistently under the Clinton administration, James Trafficant, Democrat from a Democratic Party who got reelected consistently,
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
go on there and rail against Clinton every fucking day. And guess what happened? They framed him up. They put
Hmm.
him in prison. He got out. And then, oh, while he's riding in his tractor flipped over on him.
That is a damn shame, man. Because
Yeah.
now I don't remember exactly what this is, the terminology of this is, what it's called, but it's basically that time at the end of a day in Congress when someone can just stand up and make a speech about things. I want to call it evening orders,
Yeah,
but I'm
I
not
think
sure
that's
what.
what it was called. I think that's what it was called. Yeah.
Yeah, and James Trafficant used to do that, and his big thing, that I can recall, was on the budget,
Yeah.
and he would just go after irresponsible spending.
Yeah.
Um, that is the type of Mr. Smith that
Yeah.
we need in Washington now. Guys like him and Louis Gohmert, and
Yep. Yep.
to a lesser extent, but still Ted Cruz and people like that. A
Trey
reason I
Gowdy. Yeah.
Trey Gowdy. A reason I mentioned Ted Cruz is because everybody hates him. If
I like
everybody in
him.
DC, if everybody in DC hates him,
You're doing
he's
something right.
you damn right.
I
That's
fucking
why.
hate that swamp, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's the point. That's the point. I got this from listening to Money Talk with Melanie, um, Melanie Collette, who's on SHR Media. Guys, you got to listen to her program. Comes on at 5 p.m. Eastern, and she's on Facebook Live, and also you can hear her on the SHR Media YouTube page. Check her out. She was doing an interview with a guy who was doing a paper, and he wanted to find out how big the federal government was. And guess what? He couldn't. Nobody knows, guys, listen to this. Nobody knows how big the federal government is. That should send chills up your spine and make you wet your pants. Because if we had elected officials that were responsible, in charge of things like our technology, it would be a lot better. But we don't. There are so many people in the background that are just hirelings or appointees or people like that, and they're not responsible to anyone, and yet they can rule your life. They can put you in prison. That hell, at this point, they can have you disappeared.
Well, I'll tell you
That's
this.
the
In 2003, uh, when I went to FLETC the first time, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, down in Glencoe, Georgia. There's also one down in Artesia, New Mexico. Closest town to Artesia that's a major town for a Walmart, for you folks that might want to go down there and do some training for CBP. Uh, the point is that that town is Roswell, New Mexico. Oh, wow. Hmm. Artesia, New Mexico, Roswell. Think about it.
problem.
Anyway, so the point
Mhm.
is, back then they said, oh, there's 95 federal agencies. And you could actually count that out by the IGs. IGs are actually gun carriers. They do have arrest powers if they have a prosecutor
Hmm.
in their mix, okay? And an inspector general, every agency has one.
Right.
So we're talking agriculture. I've worked with these folks, okay, the IGs, in different investigations, things that I did back in the day, and as a federal cop. So here's the point that nobody wants to look at. Last time I went through was when I went through immigration and customs, and that was, Port of Detroit, whatever. And here's what I found out. At that time, they said, oh, there's 95 to 97 federal agencies. That's a federal law enforcement training center giving you a guess, a swag,
Hmm.
a stupid, wild ass guess.
Even they didn't know at the time.
They didn't know at the time. And the last time I went through a FLETC course was down there in 2007.
Hmm.
So, these people that pontificate and think they know everything. That's why I say I'm not an expert on shit. Not an expert on shit, but I know certain things, and I know those two facts remain the same. There's other stuff that I've talked about that I know from different things. But look, what I know, I'll talk on. If you were to ask me a blunt ass question and I know nothing about it, I'll be like, I don't know anything about that. But if I do know something about it, I'll tell you my opinion on it. And I am what? The foremost expert on my opinion only.
Yeah, well, it takes a certain amount of experience and it takes a certain amount of interest in everything in the world to get to a point where you can do that. And people often ask me, "How did I get started in this?" And that's because as an 8-year old kid, um, I had been hearing about how the gods of my household, the parents, kept on saying, well, I've got to go here and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. Well, they're my parents. They had the authority to whoop my butt and hurt me, which they did. Okay, but this government thing seemed like it was their parents. And then what happens when I'm 8 years old in August of 1968? Bam! Democratic National Convention. That mess that happened, and I'm there watching it on TV, and that's what got me started in all this. At that point, I developed an interest not just in government, but how government affects people and social trends, because the whole hippie thing was going on at the time and all of that, and how that affects people, and media, how media covers all this. And I knew somehow, even as an 8-year old kid, that all of this was intertwined, that all of this affected each other. There were reverberation effects back and forth between all these elements, and I began studying that. And I never went to college because I never had the discipline to do it. But I always studied this stuff as a matter of interest, and I haven't stopped.
Well, that's the only way to look at it. I mean, honestly, if you're on the outside looking in, you can. There's always ways. I mean, networking, things like this. I mean, dude, there's people that I speak to that, have certain knowledge factors. I trust
Oh
them
yeah.
because they haven't been wrong yet. And trust me, open source intelligence. There's a guy, David. He's a former CIA guy. David. I talk about him a lot because his thing is sort of it. The Marine Corps adopted it. It's open source intelligence.
Hmm.
Robert David Still, and open source intelligence is the best way to do it. You just infiltrate. You find out what's going on. You got your ear to the ground. You figure your way in. You go into it. You find out the truth about it if you're asked to. I mean, I would never suggest anybody do anything that they're not asked to do. You know, remember the scope of work, the SOW. That is what your protection is, and follow your scope of work, and you'll always be fine. And it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter where it happened, what was going on. As long as you're right, you'll be right. If you're wrong, get ready for the handcuffs. And realize this is big boy rules. And this is something I try to tell everybody about big boy rules. If the political winds change, if they change, they can still link you with those nickel plated bracelets and take you to jail. But that's big boy rules. If you're
Yeah.
going to play the game, play it, but realize this is the reality of the game.
Oh yeah.
And it is the
That's
best game. I'm not going to lie to you. The adrenaline, everything that you feel, that you're seeing, that you're scoping, that you're knowing, that this, that, and the other, it is awesome to be a player on the map. But also realize it's fine. Who cares? When you get a knock on your door and people want to ask you a question, don't give them 1001. Don't lie. Tell the truth. Because by the time they're knocking on your door, they already know the truth. And 1001 is the punk's uh, ability to screw you because you just punked out and told a lie. And also, don't take down any evidence. If you've put stuff out places, the internet doesn't forget. And if you pull it down, that's like disavowing. Never disavow a fucking job you've done. Do the job. Be a man. Man up. And realize big boy rules are in effect at that time. Anyways, I went on a dissertation. Dude, I love talking with you, but you take me down pathways I wish I wouldn't go.
well, it's great stuff, and it's stuff that I'm sure that my listeners are going to be interested in. And it's been a big ball of fun, man. We have a lot of interest in common, and we're able to tell people a few things as well. From each other's perspectives, and it's been a great interview with you. I do appreciate it. And I know that my listeners got something out of it. I just hope your listeners got something out of hearing me. Because do we disagree on a few things? Yeah, I guess we do, but we also agree on many other things. And I think one of the main things that we agree on is that the United States of America, this country that we have, the values that this country is based on, are ones that are worth preserving and worth fighting for.
Hell yeah.
And I want to thank you.
Hell
And
yeah, my brother.
I just want to thank you. And by the way, just a little note for my listeners, guys. Normally, I bleep out language of certain types, but this time I'm not going to because, hey, this is what's real. Kaiser Schuff is a real guy with some real stuff, some real good opinions and real background, who I respect a whole lot. And listen, once in a while, you have to put up with the cuss words because what a person says is far more important than how they say
I agree. And that's why I throw them out usually for shock effect. And
it.
but that's it. It's freedom of speech, and we both
Yeah,
are
it is.
advocates of that. And I try to be funny with it and light, but sometimes the topics get a little tough, and then I have to
Mhm.
bounce out because then I'm like I said, you live the game, you play the game, be the game, and always be honest. And also, remember this for the older people out there, and I'm an older person. I'm not I'm not as young as Dave is, but I'm close to being that young. But the point is, folks, every generation, it's our obligation to mentor the youth. Find somebody and mentor them. And when I say mentor, you have to have, as my first mentor told me, he'd give me all he had. And if I felt at any time he wasn't giving me enough, I could find another mentor. And there was never any ass hurt. I still know my first mentor. And, he's doing well. I mean, he had a stroke last week, but he's doing well. Awesome man. And, but there's no ass hurt if you leave. And if he ever felt there was a time that I needed to go find another mentor, he would say that to me. And I did that. I've had numerous mentors. Remember, I'm a bastard, Dave. I never knew my father. I know his name, and that's why I know I'm half Sicilian. Uh, but the point is, only good men can make other good men. And a good man don't go by other people's definitions. As long as you're not doing anything illegal or immoral or unethical, you're on the right path. That's what a man
couldn't
does.
couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. That's why we have to try and leave our legacy for the younger people, and we have to do it with our words, and if we can do it in person, it's so much the better. And you've surpassed me in that you've had kids, and one of them's a Marine, and I'm praying to God right now for his safety and welfare, and that he be able to complete his missions um, with the skill of which he has been taught, and that he comes back home to you and your wife um, well and truly.
Yeah, well, I understand that, brother. And with that being said, folks, I'll let you close out your show after I close out mine, brother. Thank you for
Okay.
stopping by Kaiser's Castle. I'm glad you guys were able to sit on my big orange couch, sipping your coffee, tea, soda, or adult libation. And you've heard Dave. Dave's the man. And I really respect Dave Milner. And we may not agree on much or on everything. Let me rephrase that. We agree more than we disagree. But we may not agree on everything. But you notice we have a civil, funny, light conversation. This is what conversation sounded like in the 80s. Where did we fuck up? Let's backtrace it. With that being said, I'll slowly lower or raise the drawbridge as you guys finish your coffee, tea, soda, or adult libation, and you exit. Dave, it's on you.
All right. Kaiser Chef, thank you for having me on your program. It's been an honor and a privilege. You are an excellent podcaster, and I can't wait to speak to you again at some point. You're always welcome to call in to the English Defense League radio show if you'd like to do that. And I would like to say to my listeners, that is it for this time. Um, I will be back with more UBG on EDL radio. And once in a while, yeah, I'm going to have Unpleasant Blind Guy episodes. Like I said, I'm not going away. But I do know one thing. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening, and may your God go with you. Goodbye.